Why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're situated. This is the National Health Council's Spring International Patient Forum, and I'm delighted to have our speakers with us here today, and then so many of you that are participating. My name is Randy Ruta. I serve as the CEO for the National Health Council. And just as a review, many of you are members of the National Health Council, collaborators and partners. The mission of the National Health Council is to provide a unified voice for the 160 million people living with chronic conditions and disabilities, their families here in the United States, and then also globally. We've been created more than 100 years ago by and for patient organizations, and currently we have just under 180 organizations, US-based, many of whom have an international presence, like literally their charter extends to a global presence. Some of those speakers today are certainly in that position, or have close alliances and partnerships with medical societies and patient organizations globally, attend international conferences. And that was really the impetus for this conversation, this time to come together. This is our spring meeting. We'll have another convening like this in the fall for our organizations to share ideas, share issues, and just talk about issues that are occurring in the international environment that are so critically important to patients, their families, their caregivers, policymakers, and others here in the United States, and then also in support of our role internationally. You know, we recognize that the international nature of healthcare advocacy, even for those patient groups operating here in the US, I say that they truly do have, and you can see that by looking at both our supportive partners there, our industry partners, as well as our patient groups, that the presence, the resources, the spirit of sharing that you see across our membership is so key. So let me just share a few housekeeping details with you. For those of you that are just signing on, you'll know that we are recording this meeting for it to be available to those who couldn't join us right now. We are excited about that, so thank you. Everybody who is serving as a speaker, will ask that you have your mics muted so that with the speakers themselves, they'll be live, but we won't have a lot of background noise. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A portal, and I will go ahead and alert the speakers to those questions that are coming in. We will keep track of all those questions, and as a follow-up, share information or answer those questions afterwards. If you'd like to make a comment, please use the chat function. We'll be watching kind of both of those spaces for your engagement. If you have any questions about the Zoom links, technical issues, please use the email that you see there, Executive Office NHC@nhccouncil .org, and that will allow our technical team to provide support. And you will receive an evaluation at the end of this meeting, which gives us the opportunity to ask your input on, how did it go? What issues did you feel we addressed appropriately, you'd like to see us explore more of? Are there issues that we didn't get to that you'd like to see us address in the future? So just know that this is an open dialogue where you really can help us shape the agenda, as well as alert our colleagues across our peer network on those issues that are critical to us here and abroad. So during this session, we'll encourage everybody to participate, share ideas, best practices, engage in strategic thinking on international patient issues. So our agenda here, our program today, begins with updates from our National Health Council member organizations, sharing insights and updates on their international activities. Next, we'll have an introduction and update on the Sustainable Market Initiative with David Elvira Martinez from Sanofi, which will be moderated by our National Health Council Board Chair, Jeff Todd. And we'll have some reactions from Kenny Mendez at the Allergy and Asthma Foundation of America, and Harold Wimmer, who's President and CEO of the American Lung Association. So I'm very pleased to have them also participating in this conversation about climate and health and what's important to patients and their health. And then finally, I'll be able to engage in a fireside chat format about the international patient landscape with Danny Mothsey from the International Alliance of Patient Organizations. And then we will conclude our event with an open discussion and certainly ask you to share any additional thoughts, issues for future consideration. Really make sure that this forum is one in which you feel like you're really getting from it all the good information that exists across our network. So let's get started. For our first session, I've invited some of our National Health Council patient organizations to give an update on their international activities, because any given time, I'm hearing from various members of our organization, both our patient organizations, our partner organizations, our business and industry members, about things that are happening in the international arena that I think are important to the work that we all do. So with that, I'm pleased to kick off our first session. I'll introduce Jeff Todd, President and CEO of Prevent Blindness, to start us off.
There we go.
Yep.
Thanks, Randy. Well, Prevent Blindness is very much a U.S.-based patient advocacy organization. We've been around for well over 100 years, founded in 1908. We do have primarily a U.S. focus, as I said, certainly from a policy perspective, but we're becoming more and more of a global player. Every year we have a summit that attracts well over 50 registrants from 50 different countries across the country, as well as all 50 states. And with the world shrinking, our reach is expanding. Much of the work that we do is about patient education and awareness, and that's done through our website and our social media channels. So, certainly those resources can be accessed all over the world. Much of what we do at Prevent Blindness is done in collaboration with one or more partners. We very strongly believe in the power of coalition and partnerships. And the two most important of these, in my mind, really are the National Health Council and the International Agency to Prevent Blindness. The first, the National Health Council, allows us to be a part of a coalition that has largely a domestic agenda, but crosses all disease states. So here we can bring the voice of vision and eye health to bear, but benefit from voices of all other health conditions. Alternatively, at IAPB, the International Agency to Prevent Blindness, we're part of a coalition with a largely international agenda, but has a specific focus on eye health. So there we can bring the voice of the U.S. to the table while benefiting from our partners from all around the world. I'll be at the annual meeting of IAPB in Mexico City in a couple weeks, and I've recently agreed to take on the role of regional chair for North America for that group, which consists of Canada, the U.S., and the Caribbean. Mexico is a part of their Latin America division. It's a mutually beneficial relationship between Prevent Blindness and IAPB, and a couple examples I can share of this that work both ways. A few years ago, IAPB was working very hard with member states of the United Nations to pass a UN resolution on eye health, and specifically eye health's relationship to the Sustainable Development Goals. Oddly, for us anyway, one of the biggest challenges to the passage of this resolution came from the U.S. and the U.S. Ambassador's Office, who had specific concerns around components of that resolution and concerns that, frankly, Prevent Blindness didn't share. So IAPB called on us to reach out to her office and convince her to allow for its passage. She did not sign on to the resolution, but she did pull back from countering it. So we were successful, and now the UN has its first resolution on global eye health. But alternatively, we can tap into the great work that IAPB is doing. And a good example of this is coming up. Just a few weeks ago, Prevent Blindness was successful in working with two bipartisan members of Congress to introduce a bill to advance children's vision in the U.S. While we're certainly celebrating its introduction, we have a long way to go for its passage. It just so happens that this year's World Sight Day is always held in October of each year, and it always has a very different agenda and different focus. but it so happens that this year's focus is going to be on children's eye health. And so we're able to leverage that global campaign that IAPB is going to be bringing forward this fall to re-elevate the importance of children's vision and use that as a message to encourage members of Congress to sign on to this bill and hopefully get it passed either this year or next year. And so, as you can see, it's really become an important role for us as a U.S. focused organization to be a part of this global effort. It's something I've believed in for a long time, and I'll say over the last few years, my board has completely gotten on board with this and encouraged us and me to become more active on the international and global front. They see it as a win-win for us as well as for the global agenda.
Jeff, that's great. You mentioned the board becoming increasingly aware and supportive of your role. Have the board members been able to attend any of these international activities to directly experience some of that energy?
I actually have, I think 3 of my board members are fairly active in IAPB through their day jobs. And so having them there to also support me and prevent blindness has its benefits as well. So
Sure.
that's certainly been very helpful.
Well, that's terrific. I think the National Health Council, certainly its members, know that, the concerns of patients and then the support that we try to provide patients doesn't know borders, right? I mean, it's just universal in terms of how those issues affect people trying to improve and have health and well-being. And so it's great, though, to have us kind of start to have patterns and ways that we can relate to others that, if not are a formal part of the organization, certainly something, as you suggested, that's understood to be valuable and something to go forward. We may want to learn from this conversation, your experience, even as the National Health Council looks at its next strategic plan. And should we maybe codify in that plan a more committed place? We've always been present internationally, as Danny will attest, but we just do that kind of as a mission-based but more ad hoc way. We've been trying to strengthen that. Maybe that's something for us to consider. But thanks for sharing that.
Just real quick, Randy, that's a good point, and it's actually something we're looking at as well. We're about to relaunch our strategic plan process, and currently, while we are working in this area, we don't have anything in our strategic plan to speak to that. So we'll be adding that as well.
It'll be interesting. I know that Leah Howard has shared from the National Psoriasis Foundation's perspective, something like 40% of their web traffic, people that are accessing their resources online, asking questions, are coming from outside the United States. I think they're part of various psoriasis and related kinds of organizations internationally, both on the clinical side and the patient side. And she's just felt like, well, that's just what we should do. We have these resources we should share. I think we'll follow your lead. We'll consider it within our own strategic planning. Maybe there's a model there that would allow us to, not lose the focus, but acknowledge the benefit of that kind of synergy. Well, that is just great. Okay. Well, why don't I then move from you, Jeff, to Lisa Butler. She's the president and CEO for GBS CIDP. Lisa, you've been a part of this conversation all along, and I really appreciate your leadership there. And so I felt a little awkward coming back to you and saying, once again, could I ask you to share? But you've talked about just how your cause and how your leadership and how your efforts really go beyond the United States. I think that is part of your charter. What would you want to share with us today?
Thanks, Randy. So Jeff, listening to you talk, we share, I think, a lot of the same position, right? We began as this US-based rare disease organization that supports primarily Guillain-Barré syndrome and chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. These are both autoimmune, rare neurological conditions. But, like eye health, these conditions can affect anyone, anywhere, any age, right? So it knows no borders. And interesting, the talk on strategic planning, we are in the first year of a new 3-year strategic plan, and part of the goals within the strategic plan is to increase our global footprint. So very, very much a part of our direction as we move forward. Especially because we have a scientific medical advisory board that is a global scientific medical advisory board, right? We have these experts all over the world. We have a Centers of Excellence program, and that's also global. And we're very heavily volunteer-based, and we have volunteers all over the world. Many in the US, but we also have them many externally. So we had all these elements in place, but what we had sort of the bones of it, but we didn't have feet on the ground, right? And how are we supporting these volunteers? How are we helping them create community? How are we helping them share the resources we have just so that we can ultimately serve more patients? I mean, that's the very, very simple goal here, right? So we decided that we needed to take a giant step and hire our first employee outside of the US. So for those of you who have done this, you know that it's complicated, right? Payroll and benefits can be very, very complicated when you're a US-based organization. So we did find an outside company that helped us with that. I'm happy to share that process and resource offline. But I'm happy to say in January, we hired our first international representative of the foundation. She lives in Palermo, Italy. She's a patient herself. And we actually did sort of a really interesting thing. We took her off our board of directors and hired her as an employee. So Nancy, she's actually on the call today. She had several years on the board of directors, so she really understood the organization. But she'd been in her role for 20 years in hospital administration and doing this role as a volunteer for us, and it took a little bit of arm twisting, but I think now she's more busy now than she was before. But so we've done a lot of work to try and just increase our presence and deepen our presence, and we're starting that in Europe because Nancy's in Europe, and we really hope to expand this in other quadrants of the world, looking at Asia Pac, Latin, South America, that kind of thing. But right now we're concentrating really mostly in Europe. And what we're finding is that we need to be present, not only with Nancy communicating to individuals and to our volunteers, but you can't just dip in and have a conference one year and then come back 5 years later, right? So we did patient conferences in Barcelona, Vienna, and Copenhagen 2 years ago. Now we're going back. We're meeting with our volunteers. We're sort of on this, what we call global listening tour. So we're meeting with volunteers in different parts of the world. You know, what are your unmet needs? How can we support you? What can we do as this organization to support your needs in your community? Because it's different, right? And the way patients connect in the US is very different than patients connect in the UK or in Italy or in Germany. So we don't want to tell them how to do that. We want to learn how they do it. And then we want to share with them all the resources that we have, right? So we feel like we've got a pretty robust program offering in the US, and we really want to expand that and make it just more available outside of the US. So Nancy really began, she's only been with us 6 months, but it feels like 6 years with what she's been able to accomplish. So thank you, Nancy. But Nancy is constantly on Zoom, connecting with new volunteers all over the world. We now have a new volunteer in Mexico, South Africa, India, Argentina. We just got an application for a center of excellence in Bangladesh. So, you know, this has sort of a snowball effect, right? Once you have your KOLs in other countries, then they represent centers and they want to apply to become a center of excellence. And then oftentimes what happened in Argentina, we had a physician that came to us and said, I have some very interested patients. So now the physician has helped us create this patient community there. And then he said, oh, and by the way, there's this other great institution in another part of Argentina. Can they apply to be a center of excellence? So it really, you know, the more you do, the more there is to do, right? But that's exciting to us as we're emerging. So Nancy's also talking to volunteers from Gibraltar, Scotland, the Philippines, Belgium, England. It's really, really growing. And the more they know about us, the more we can know about them. We're translating all of our educational materials in many different languages. And, you know, one piece of this is that it's very important, I think, is that our industry partners are very, very interested in us creating this global expansion, right? And they are coming to us with ideas that other patient groups have done that have had, have a more established presence globally, be it in Europe or Asia Pac or whatever. And so now Nancy has connected with these other organizations, primarily right now in Europe, but they have been very supportive in Nancy being able to engage and be present. So one of the first things Nancy did was establish the foundation in the European Transparency Registry. So that allows us to sort of do this work as a patient advocacy organization in Europe. So that was a big accomplishment. We're now active members of many different international organizations in Europe. Eurotas, Rare Disease Day, the Rare Disease Observatory, excuse me, the Rare Disease Alliance. Also very, very active in sort of global initiatives. I know, Randy, you were at the UN meeting in Geneva, and Nancy was also there for a group called UNITAR. And this is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And this focus in our space, in our rare disease space, is around plasma. That's the therapy that our patients take. So we're working on sort of this global plasma awareness. And that's really, industry brought this to us as an opportunity. So it's really, we're pulling resources from many, many different places, from, as I mentioned, the physician community, our scientific advisory board, and pharma has really been very, very helpful. We now have a presence in international topics such as the IPPC, which is the International Plasma Protein Congress, through the PPTA. Nancy has been sharing communications and relationships with IPOPI, so that is the Primary Immune Deficiency Organization of Europe. So that's been great. And again, all these organizations have really just welcomed us to this space. So I can't say enough about our first sort of dip into this global presence with a permanent presence with Nancy, but she joins all of our staff meetings virtually. So we're really doing she has access to our database and our volunteer onboarding process. So we're really doing everything we can to, bring the world closer, if you will. So happy to talk to anybody again offline about anything I've mentioned, but it's really exciting to think that we can begin to reach more patients. And the rare disease space, a lot of our challenge revolves around delay in diagnosis, misdiagnosis. So the more we can share these resources, the more our volunteers can create community where they are. Hopefully, the better outcomes we will get with earlier diagnosis, earlier treatment, and a better recovery. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, it's so inspiring, and it's just such an example of how you're expanding the reach of the mission and the way that you can bring advocacy and impact forward in such a collaborative way. I think we heard previously from Donna Cryer about what it takes to have staff engaged globally, and there's the nuts and bolts of it. What do you need to think about for international conferences and travel? That's what Leanne West is putting a meeting together for Southern Italy, I think in about 10 days or so, for the children's cancer community. And so there's things for us to share just on, how did you do that and how did you navigate that? But I think then, as you speak to being present at some of these international convenings, at a minimum, it would be good to know who from our network, the National Health Council network, is going to be there. And we start to think about, for things like the World Health Assembly, which was my first time in Geneva. I've always worked with the UN in New York. Wow, the energy, and I think Danny will talk a little bit of that. Others of you were there or have been there in the past. That is a place where you can get things done. And there was such a strong US presence, the National Academy of Medicine and our pharma partners, that you can get a lot done, and you could get a lot done in an aligned way that allows us to move further and faster, I think, just by planning ahead a little bit. So Lisa, thank you so much for that. We'll look to share some of your resources as we go to expand what we have online. And then as you hear more about NHC Connect, it really will be creating communities where individuals, peers can kind of share directly with each other. And I think all of that's going to be a good avenue for the international work. So thank you
Thank you,
so
Randy.
much.
I just a thought came to me as you were saying that, and I think that, um, clearly we are a much newer country, and there can be in various countries in Europe some resistance to the U.S. coming in and sort of claiming to create this work, create this space that has existed in Europe long before us. But I think the more we work together so that there is this understanding that we're here to support and bring knowledge to what they already have. We're not here to take over, right? We're not here to tell you how to do it. But I think that the more Europe especially sees the US being active, the more opportunity we have as a group.
That's a really good point. And I think, looking at, Julia Jenkins, you're here, you played such a huge role in helping the rare community, be connected to from the US side to the European and global side. I think there's probably a conversation for us to have about how to be kind of culturally appropriate and respectful as you even bring some of these ideas.
Yes.
The enthusiasm's there, patients talk patients, there's so many reasons that can be easy. But I think you don't want to have something unbeknownst to you, unconsciously step into something
Right.
that then has to be navigated or you step back from. Julie, I don't know if we can alert your mic, but I saw you kind of nod. Do you understand some of those dynamics, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I'm in a new role now. I've left the patient organization role and I've just joined BioCRIS recently. And now my new role is global, so I'm even more excited to do this work because at EveryLife, as much as we wanted to do global and as much as there was kind of that urge to do global, there wasn't capacity for us to expand to serve the global community more than what we were doing. And so for me personally, I was like, well, maybe it's time for me to do that in a different capacity. But it certainly, now that I work with my global colleagues, there's so much that could be shared, and really everyone's eager to learn, and the problems are similar. But yeah, you definitely don't want to come in and say, this is how we do it in the US. That will not go over us. Like Germany, France, they do not care what the US is doing. But they have, and they think they're different, but they actually, their challenges and their goals are the same. They're similar. They have the same joy in coming together, but they certainly don't want to be perceived as being the same as the US.
There you go. Not to mention global North and South. There is value for all of us, no matter what your level of technology, infrastructure, support, all of those things. Because our common denominator is we care about patients, we care about their health, we see patients holistically, they're engaged and active. So thanks sorry to call on you, Julia, but I just know Julia was at a meeting that I just actually came from. It's called the Patient Engagement Open Forum last year. We had some of these conversations. Some of you that are on the line were there more recently. That meeting was about 2 weeks ago. It was in Baveno, Italy. That was a 3-day meeting of the Patient Engagement Open Forum. It was co-sponsored by the Partnership for Medicine Development, Patient-Focused Medicine Development. I'm on their board, and it's a wonderful global organization, very collaborative with not just patient organizations, but pharma partners, other partners in the clinical side. Really a great resource. And I'm going to ask Jason to speak up because he was a first-time attendee at this meeting. There were over 200 people that were there. Some of those people who are part of our National Health Council network. It's all about collaboration. It's all about alignment and getting a greater impact by working together. This particular conference had amazing issue streams, conversations about advocacy and engagement, innovation, data, devices and med tech, and something that Danny may touch on, this patient movement catalyst. which is really a declaration on behalf of the patient community that says, you know, we've been patient-centered, we've been patient-engaged. Time for us to move to really a patient-empowered presence, because I think the closer in stakeholders, certainly that's true of the biopharma sector, really understand the value of patient engagement. I think we still have work to do more broadly with other sectors. This call to action on the part of the patient movement catalyst is something I'll be sharing with you. It was really exciting. But let me ask Jason, who's with us here from the Arthritis Foundation. Jason, this was your first time participating in the Patient Engagement Open Forum. What was it like? Tell us a little about yourself and then tell us what it was like.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I'm Jason Kim. I'm at the Arthritis Foundation, where I am part of the science team and represent osteoarthritis, within the foundation. And I come from an organization like many of you here that is primarily or heavily focused on the U.S. And I think I generally try to stay in my lane in terms of country and stay with what I know. And this was one of my first opportunities to go outside of the country and meet, of course, people like you, Randy, but also many of the members here and other people from other organizations across Europe, across the world. I think that was really eye-opening. I mean, firstly, and I think you'd agree, Randy, like it was a really well-organized, thoughtfully organized meeting. It was 200 people, but still kind of intimate and highly participatory. And I think, I often found myself at tables just really heavily interacting with whoever. And that's part of the reason why I went there, to kind of get out of arthritis and think about something else, and other diseases that are out there, and see how others are doing things differently. And I think those differences was sort of a key insight that I took away. Firstly, I think a lot of gratitude for my organization and being in the U.S., where we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of established culture, and not all countries and not all organizations sort of have that. So that was sort of eye-opening for me in some ways. But then also to think about, and I know Lisa and Julia just talked about how countries and other organizations don't want us to come down and be prescriptive about how we do things. But I think because of our resources and because of some culture that we have here, we often do find ourselves in a leadership position. And it just got me thinking about how I might be able to help and share what we do and what we know at my organization with others out there that might not have those same advantages. And then at the same time, I think many of those organizations do things better. They might have great ideas and of course a lot of passion, and that kind of fills your heart and gives you energy to come back and focus on the patients that I serve, the disease that I serve, and of course how we as a community need to support each other. Not only patients and our sort of colleague nonprofit organizations, but I think I met a lot of industry people who often represent these powerful, well-resourced companies, but then within they're battling for the patient, and they kind of need our help and support and energy as well. And so I think those were sort of these big overarching sort of concepts and thoughts that I came away with. It was a wonderful meeting, and I think it just gave me a lot of value. Hopefully I can attend that again, as well as continue to contribute and attend meetings like this. So thanks, Randy.
Well, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. I was just excited to see Jason there. Of course, the Arthritis Foundation, amazing organization. Steve Taylor's leadership, so many of our colleagues there are just awesome. And so it's nice to see that you could be represented and share information and engage and take that back to your organization and us as a community. So thanks so much for being willing to share those first impressions. We'll look for you abroad, and we'll also talk about how we coordinate our representation in some of these meetings. You know, I know our friends from the Milken Institute are here. They're regularly bringing, you know, information and support forward. I mentioned Patient-Focused Medicine Development, the organization where I sit on the board. Many of our pharma partners, either globally or the European companies, support that work. And there are actually stipends that are available to help support participation for patient groups. And so for those that are from that community on the call, thank you so much for that. And then there's an award ceremony. It's called Made with Patients, and it was so moving. This was just the second year where individuals and organizations in the patient advocacy and service community were recognized. And it literally brings tears to your eyes. People are so gracious and so thankful to be a part of our movement. And they were from all over the world in terms of being recognized. I think there were almost 120 nominations. And so then only a handful were able to be recognized. There is some amazing thinking and models that are occurring among those award winners. So I will bring all of that forward to all of you as a follow-up to this conversation. But in some ways, Jason, you kind of give us an introduction to the collaborations we have, very important patient issues, you know, with our pharma sector partners and others. So for that, let me move to the next part of our agenda. And that's to talk about the Sustainable Market Initiative with David Elvira Martinez. And this session is going to be moderated by Jeff Todd, and then I'll look for reactions from the American Lung Association's president and CEO, Harold Wimmer, as well as Kenny Mendez, president and CEO of the Asthma and Allergy Foundation, both organizations doing significant work in the climate and health space. And Jeff, we heard from you earlier. You serve as president and CEO of Prevent Blindness, and also are the chair currently and a longtime leader in the National Health Council. I could go on in terms of your bios. You're just such an amazing leader in this space. Thank you for your history, and thank you for continuing to think of new ways to advance our collective cause. So, Jeff, why don't I turn over to you, and you can move us into this next conversation.
Thanks so much, Randy. And if I could just real quick before introducing David, I was taken by the conversation that Julian and Jason brought up, which I completely agree with, about being too US centric. But I just wanted to make the point that works both ways. I can't tell you how many times I've been told how incredible the Australian vision care system is, and that we should model that, as if Australia and US are identical, I think, because we're both large land masses. Well, I mean, the US and Australia are very, very different. And so it works both ways, you know. We have to all look at our countries individually and what makes them all special. But thanks for asking me to introduce David and to lead this conversation. So our speaker for this session is David Elvira Martinez. David is the Global Corporate Public Policy Head at Sanofi. He's currently heading the department that specializes in international health policy topics, defining the company's global position on relevant policy issues, and coordinating Sanofi's global policy contributions at the key international trade associations, such as the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations International Board-Sponsored Committee, Pharma's International Senior Executive Committee, and the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. So welcome, David, and could you give us a little bit of background about Sanofi and the Sustainable Markets Initiative?
Thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Randy and the team to invite me to be here. And today, as Jeff said, I'm representing not only Sanofi, but this global alliance, the Sustainable Market Initiative, the health task force of this Sustainable Market Initiative. And let me just frame and try to answer your question, Jeff. Basically, sharing our thoughts on 3 topics that will explain why there is this activity from the Sustainable Market Initiative. First, to share with all the audience our thoughts about why is relevant climate change and environment on health. Secondly, why there is this need of this global alliance, public and private alliance. And finally, also to share some thoughts, taking advantage of this audience about what we have learned literally with global patient advocates like Randy and all of groups that has been starting to think about how the climate change and the environmental challenges are impacting the health. How then patient advocate groups can contribute to this agenda. So let me start, if I may, with the why we are here on this topic today. And why it's relevant, from the health perspective, the climate change discussion and environmental challenges. And basically for 4 reasons. One, because we have to be conscious how climate change and environmental challenges are impacting humanitarian emergencies. Because we know that wildfires, and you know that from US and Canada, wildfires, floods, tropical storms, hurricanes are increasing in scale, are increasing in frequency, and increasing in intensity. And that will impact, obviously, more than health, all the humanitarian needs and emergencies. This is one first reason. Second is because we have increasing health risks because of climate change and environmental challenges. Why? Because look, this is figures from the WHO, the World Health Organization. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year due to undernutrition, malaria, diarrhea, or heat stress. So not only for emerging economies or low and middle income countries, but also can be very disruptive in high income countries as well. The third is about infrastructures, and this is the connection as well. Healthcare systems should be prepared for this stress that is related to the impact of environmental challenges into health and healthcare systems. And these impacts, again, not only emerging economies, also if you are thinking about how will impact this intensity of new environmental phenomena, topics or areas like cold chain, eventually disrupted by this new source of impact on the health system. That's a relevant aspect also to be aware of. And finally, because we know that the role of healthcare is to provide solutions to health issues, okay? But we have to be conscious that when we are providing healthcare and we are providing solutions, we are also contributing to, for example, the carbon emissions of to the planet. So we are trying to tackle, the issues, the health issues related with the climate, while we are also contributing to kind of impact on climate. And that's the point we want to address at the Sustainable Market Initiative. Let me give you one figure: 5%. 5% is the percentage of the global carbon emissions that are connected to the way we deliver care in the world. Okay, 5% it's a lot. Well, it's more than all the emissions of one sector that is very sensitive to us on the climate discussion, that is aeronautics. So we are very worried about if we overuse airplanes, but we are not conscious that the way we are delivering care to protect us about the health issues of climate, it's even more relevant in terms of carbon emissions. So that's why we can think in more efficient solutions that contribute to better outcomes, you know, so we can think about more efficient healthcare systems that at the same time are more carbon sensitive. For example, digital solutions or telemonitoring. That can improve part of the solutions, the outcomes, while we are also sensitive to the emissions. Or health equity. We think that all the discussion about the environmental health issues are relevant from the health equity perspective. And why? Because we know that the effects of climate change disproportionately impact more marginalized populations. So while we are tackling the environmental challenge, we are also thinking about more efficient, more cost-effective healthcare system and more equity in the way we deliver care. And then I move to the second topic that I wanted to share with you. Then how we react to that. And the Sustainable Market Initiative was one of our response. What is the Sustainable Market Initiative? Is a global alliance, is a partnership, private and public partnership. We are several companies, pharma companies, but also healthcare providers like Bupa, several pharmaceutical companies, but also the National Health Service in UK, also UNICEF, also World Health Organization, also academia like University of Pavia and other actors that together we have two objectives mainly. One is to take joint scalable solutions to deliver net zero healthcare. And secondly, to provide the tools to do that. For example, how we measure our impact on healthcare, you know, our footprint in terms of carbon emissions. So based on that, let me focus on one of the 4 working groups that we have at SMI. We have one about supply. This is our responsibility. For example, we are pharma companies. We want to provide and deliver our drugs in a sustainable way. The second working group is about digital innovation, because we know that digital innovation will impact in more efficient solutions, but also more carbon sensitive solutions. The third is about consumer health and well-being, because we have more holistic approach of how we can manage health from this well-being perspective. And the fourth and final, where I will just explain a little bit more, is what we call the patient care pathway working group. That is thinking about how the interaction of the patient with the healthcare system can be managed in a more sustainable way, okay? And what is our contribution then as SMI? What we are contributing is about, okay, let's organize, let's understand this interaction, okay? Let's then provide a framework to understand and to measure this interaction so that we can identify the hotspots that we can manage to reduce carbon emissions in the interaction of patients with healthcare. And, you know, we conclude something that it will be quite obvious and compatible from the better healthcare in terms of outcomes and more sustainability healthcare. You will see, because we identify 7 levers to drive this decarbonization of healthcare system. One is also price prevention. The first one, if we prevent more, we are more efficient in terms of outcomes, for sure. We provide more health, for sure, but we are also more sensitive in terms of the environment. Second, early diagnosis. Third, active management of the disease. We can think about how we manage the disease in order to have better outcomes while we are having less emissions. The lever of care remotely, all the digital agenda is quite relevant in that regard. Reduce treatment emissions. We can think about technologies that are less emitters of carbon. So let's design technical solutions that are better in terms of ensure outcomes, but also reduce emissions. sixth one is about avoiding unnecessary activity, over prescription, overuse of resources. And finally, how we decarbonize the healthcare sites, our hospitals, our primary care centers, etc. This is more or less the framework. And we use this framework with a methodology to measure. And I give you 2 or 3 examples, depending on the time. I think it's 2 examples. We measure, for example, what is the impact of having a more active immunization policy in one country? Let's apply this to one country and one policy, UK, RSV immunization, so to try to avoid bronchiolitis in UK. What is applying this framework and this measurement, these ways to measure the impact? What is the impact? Well, the conclusion is that thanks to this policy, we can avoid the amount of carbon emissions equivalent of 1 year of all ambulances fleet of London Metropolitan of 1 year. It's equivalent. So it's a double win-win. It makes sense from a health perspective and outcomes perspective to support immune and prevention policies from the outcomes perspective, but at the same time, we have a very relevant impact in terms of decarbonization. And we can use the same for some chronic diseases. We measure what is the impact of a better management of diabetes. And we know that if we promote more prevention and we manage better the treatment of diabetes, we obviously multiply by 5 the outcomes, better outcomes, but we reduce half the emissions of the same person if this person has not complications or comorbidities related with the lack of good management of diabetes. This is the kind of evidence and proof points that we are providing to the community. My third concept, and it's my last message here, how patients can contribute to that. Just some ideas here based on what we learned from Randy, for example. So some ideas, and I will be happy to, and I will love, the reaction of the rest of the audience. But basically, we see that patient advocacy groups can contribute to better educational campaigns. If we have this in the radar as the challenge of the future, patient advocacy groups are drivers of these educational campaigns, because you are expert in advocacy, in policy, in health policy advocacy, but then you can provide also this agenda in your interactions, especially when all the environmental challenges are impacting your therapeutic area, your diseases. It's this natural connection. Community engagement. So patients, you are part of the community. You are drivers of the community. It's a perfect match to include this in your agenda. Healthcare system reform. So if you can provide more evidence that it's better for your health, it's better for the health, but it's also better for the health of the planet, it's an additional, pushing value proposition to politicians about some of the policies that you can be discussing or advocating for. And finally, for research, for those topics like climate change, like environmental challenges that are impacting health, this requires a kind of advocacy to put it as a priority as well. And when we are as a community providing better solutions that are good for the health and good for the health of the planet, this could be measured, can be recognized, and eventually rewarded in terms of, okay, let's put it as high in the political agenda. I leave it here. Sorry for the extension of my response, my answer to your question, Jeff, but I would love to know what is the reaction of the rest of the audience.
Well, thanks, David. And I'll say we actually saved a little time because you answered the question I was going to ask about how the patient community can be involved.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I appreciate your leadership at Sanofi and your insights here, but I'd like to invite a couple friends to to react. For fellow members of the National Health Council Board of Directors, Harold Wimmer and Kenny Mendez. Harold is, I'm going to give just a brief intro, cut the intro a little short so we can get into the conversation, but Harold Wimmer is the president and CEO of the American Lung Association, the nation's leading organization dedicated to saving lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease. And Kenny Mendez has been president and CEO of the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America since 2018. So thank you, Harold and Kenny, for joining. And I'm curious, and I know David is as well, of your reactions to this discussion so far.
Well, maybe I'll start, because I would just want to say thank you to the NHC for raising this issue about climate change and health. I gotta say, you know, David, in terms of you're talking about alliances, human emergencies related to weather events, infrastructure, you know, in what you're doing in the healthcare system, this is all not new to Harold and me. I mean, in terms of what we've been doing as an organization related to climate change, we've been living it. You talk about alliances. You know, we worked very closely with the American Lung Association in order to amplify some of these advocacy and these policy issues. But I just want to say it very simply, not moving away from the major health events, allergy seasons are getting a lot longer and a lot worse. And that's because of climate change. And you don't need to kind of wait for the human emergencies. We've been doing an allergy capitals report for many years now, and we've seen the increase in pollen releases because of carbon dioxide. People are always coming to us saying, my allergies feel a lot worse. What can I do about it? And, you know, we've got policy issues that we work with the American Lung Association to reduce air pollution. And Harold, I know you have your clean air report, which is something that we always cite in our journals talking about alliances.
Harold, you want to jump in here?
Oh, sure. And thanks, Kenny and Jeff, for the opportunity to participate. And, you know, I would certainly echo what Kenny has been his response. And in terms of David, your leadership in this area with Sanofi and the other coalition partners is certainly critical. And, you know, the American Lung Association certainly believes that swift, bold action on climate change is essential to protecting global health. And the American Lung Association has really been involved with addressing air quality issues now for more than 50 years. But most recently, where we have included in our work the impact of climate change on lung health. And I mean, as a nonprofit health organization, we really carry out our work by educating the public and political decision makers based on science. As Kenny referenced, that the American Lung Association issues an annual State of the Air report, which is showing that 25% of individuals who live in the United States reside in a county with poor air quality. And what we're also seeing is that the warning levels continue to increase in terms of air quality tied to heat, the increase in temperatures, which is certainly impacting and becoming a greater risk factor for individuals who are suffering from some form of lung disease. So the Lung Association is carrying out its work through partnerships like with Kenny's organization. and many other public health organizations that are part of the National Health Council. So we believe that we certainly have an important role to really get the public health message out. And in order for us to be successful in doing this, it has to be through partnerships and collaboration among the public health community. And, you know, we believe that we can make a real impact also through our advocacy efforts. And I think of recent, we've been able to really demonstrate through our efforts jointly that we have been able to make significant impacts in investments in clean alternative fuels, electric vehicles. Example, you know, our efforts around getting more electric school buses on the roads. And you know, in these types of efforts, I believe the science truly shows impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, carbon pollution, ozone, particle pollution. Our organizations have that data, and by working together, we can really help inform decision makers on making the right choices and also sharing with the public in terms of what we can do in a practical way to help make an impact on climate change.
Absolutely.
Maybe
Thanks, Harold.
I don't know what our time frame is here, but if I could just add two more points here on health equity and asthma and allergies. You know, there's something called allergic asthma, which is triggered by seasonal allergies. And over 10 people die each day from asthma, and certain communities are disproportionately impacted by asthma. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to die, 5 times more likely to die treated in an emergency room for asthma, and Black women have the highest mortality rate. So climate change, pollution in urban environments impact certain communities. And when you mentioned the number of 250,000 extra deaths each year, certainly asthma is part of that, but it's happening right now. It's not even extra deaths, it's happening every day. So I just want to emphasize that for the group. And one last quick story here on the shortages in the supply chain. This is the double whammy. So when you have a shortage of albuterol, which is the rescue medication for asthma, which is what happened because of supply chain issues, then it impacts the community even worse. So I just wanted to add those 2 data points for you, just to build off of what some of the things that you said, David.
Well, thank you, Kenny and Harold. And we are at time. David, do you want to add a final remark to take us out of this conversation?
But basically, just reinforce this idea that we have been insisting, alone we can move the needle. We need this joint effort that can be based on science and proof points and evidence and figures that we are providing in our advocacy from different angles. And how relevant is for the way we manage our diseases, but how the healthcare infrastructure, and the supply example is very clear. Part of the solutions are impacted because our infrastructures in the healthcare system or the supply system are very sensitive as well to the climate change. So it's a double kind of effect on health and on infrastructures and healthcare system.
Well, thank you so much, Kenny and Harold and David, for sharing your insights. I know this is going to be an ongoing conversation and an important one. And with that, I will hand it back over to Randy.
Great. Thank you so much. What a great conversation. David, thank you for your presentation. Harold and Kenny, thank you for all the work that you've been doing and kind of amplifying why this is so important. This is really kind of not a kickoff conversation. The National Health Council membership is involved in the strategic market initiatives and other kinds of conversations. But I think it's a point in time for us to organize ourselves to do more. And that was a great call to action that you provided, David. It really rings true for me. I mean, just recent conversations, when we think about people with chronic conditions, multiple conditions, the fact that dengue fever is back in the UK, the fact that Zika and malaria is sweeping across the southern parts of the United States, this is not good. I'm sitting in Phoenix, Arizona. It will be 109 degrees today Fahrenheit. That's 43 degrees centigrade. Last year, 700 citizens, mostly vulnerable citizens in Phoenix, died from heat exposure. 2,500, I believe, in the United States. And as you mentioned, the trends are only going to complicate that. So thank you so much for this conversation to really re-energize and engage our whole community around these issues. So really appreciate it, gentlemen. So now I'll take us to our final speaker of the day, who I'm very excited to have with us, and I think kind of builds on the conversation that we've had so far. I'll be introducing Dani Motzi, who's the IAPO, the International Alliance of Patient Organizations CEO. She has a strong social policy background, a commitment to creating opportunities for people to feel empowered within their own communities. She's got experience in community development, policy design, implementation, project management, and I'm pleased that Dani has joined an organization that the National Council helped fund or found many years ago. Dani joined in 2016 and more recently has become their president and CEO. Dani, we did share some information about you, your organization, as well as the resolution, which just 1 week ago was enacted or put forward by at the World Health Assembly. I'll just stop talking and invite you to tell us a little bit about the origins of IAPO, what it's focusing on now, your enthusiasm. Take it away.
Thank you, Randy. First of all, it's a big pleasure to be here and get to know a little bit more about your members and have the opportunity to present IAPO as well. And I really enjoyed hearing the word collaboration, partnerships, and it's embedded, I think, within the civil society movement. And that's how IAPO was born as well. As you well know, the National Health Council was one of the organizations that founded IAPO because patient organizations from around the world identified that there was a gap at the international level and a gap for patient organizations to collaborate on common goals and also tackle challenges and transcend to tackle challenges that transcend national borders. So that's how IAPO was born 25 years ago. And we are the global voice and the focal point for patient organizations around the world. And we represent patients of all nations across all disease areas. And everything that we do is focused on promoting patient-centered healthcare. But how do we promote patient-centered healthcare? So we work with patient organizations and build their capacity so they can do their work more effectively. We advocate on key health policies. We try to influence international, regional, and national health agendas and policies. But also we build cross-sector alliances and work very collaboratively with other health stakeholders. I'm talking about medical and health professionals, policymakers, academics, researchers, everyone that needs to be on the table. We have almost 300 member organizations across 71 countries. So we are spread out through the 6 WHO regions. We represent 54 disease areas. And our members, they're very, very diverse in terms of their capacity, budget, influence. Some are very local and led by families on a voluntary basis. Others have a big capacity and influence, such as Alzheimer's Disease International. And they work on those different levels as well, local, national, regional, and international. One thing that it's really important to highlight, and it's very unique to IAPO, is that we are a non-state actor in official relations with the WHO. And we've had this status for almost 18 years now. And this is key for such an organization because that allows us to join the WHO meetings, such as their executive board, the World Health Assembly, the regional committee meetings for all the WHO regions. We are part of their consultations. We can bring the patient voice and embed this within the WHO, but also make sure that what the WHO is doing can be translated and support the work that the patient organizations are doing on the ground. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later. We have 4 categories of membership. I'm not going to talk in detail about this now. I can share a link so everyone can learn about this, but I think it's important to highlight that we are fully patient-driven, and this is something that it's very important, is the essence of IAPO's work, and it's important for us to continue like this. So in a nutshell, IAPO is a big facilitator, connector, and platform for patient organizations to work on agendas that are common to all patient organizations across the world. And I'm talking about, for instance, universal health coverage, social participation, which we'll talk a little bit more, gender, youth. And we want to connect and facilitate relationships, connect patient organizations with other stakeholders, build these networks, because as we all know, we cannot think of health without thinking about partnership. And of course, continue to support patient organizations to develop their work on the ground. This is an overall presentation of about IAPO. If you have any more specific questions about the organization itself, just let me know. But I would like now to talk about the initiatives, some of the initiatives that IAPO is taking forward or collaborating, and mostly focus on what we are doing within the WHO environment, because there is a lot going on with regards to including the voice of the civil society as a whole. And IAPO is there to ensure that the patient voice, the patient organization's voice as a unique civil society actor has a special role on this interaction with the WHO. When I mentioned that we are non-state actors, and that means we can do a lot with them. We have a triennial plan, and we have to review this and go a very specific process of reporting. And but also there are other very important initiatives that are happening, and one of them, and I want to highlight to you all that it's open to any civil society organization, is the WHO Civil Society Commission. This was established last year after 75 years of the existence of the WHO. And this is opening the door each time more for civil society to engage with the WHO. They are about to create working groups there to really embed the participation of communities, patients, and patients' organizations, and health stakeholders from non-governmental health stakeholders within their structure. Because believe it or not, it's not all departments of the WHO work with the civil society. There are some that are much more developed than the others. There are also the opportunity that's increasing each time more for civil society to be accredited at regional level, to have a more active presence within the regional agenda of the WHO. This is a process that it's much more easier to go through, than becoming a non-state actor with the WHO itself. Anyone who wants more information about this, I'm happy to support and share. I have a list of links that I'll share with
Great.
go and learn more about these opportunities, but also I'm always open to address any questions you may have. And being a non-state actor in official relations with the WHO allows IAPO to be present, as I said, in their main and big meetings. The World Health Assembly, but also the regional committee meetings. What we usually do at this space is we make statements, what they call statements, and we make statements at an agenda item of their of that's going to be discussed in these meetings to really reinforce the position of the patient organizations on a specific health issue. This is more like a political statement. We also organize side events, and this is a moment where we can gather different stakeholders to raise awareness about a specific topic, but also start relationships, build networks, and develop the capacity of some of these health stakeholders. And I'm talking not only about building the capacity of patient organizations, but other health stakeholders that they don't know much about patient organizations. And that takes me to what we've done this year at the World Health Assembly, where we had a side event. The theme was leveraging patient organizations as key partners in the delivery of universal health coverage. This event was to raise awareness about the key role that patient organizations have in the delivery of universal health coverage. And that was an important step for us, IAPO, and hopefully for the patient community as well, to position ourselves in a moment where the WHO is opening the doors for the civil society to work with them. And I talked about the WHO Civil Society Commission, but also a resolution that has been created and voted, and as Randy said, approved as the WHA this year. It's a resolution to institutionalize social participation within health systems to advance universal health coverage. Again, after 75 years, the WHO comes, well, to be more precise, member states, they came together and created this resolution to institutionalize something that it's key for societies to advance with, no matter what kind of policy they're implementing, but more specifically with health policies. And this resolution will open many, many doors for the civil society as a whole. And we believe that patient organizations, they have a specific role in this because we represent the people with the lived experiences. We know how it is to live with a condition, and we have to have a leading role on these discussions. So our side event was talking about all of this, and it was a big dialogue, an introduction, a beginning of a networking that will continue now that the resolution was implemented, because we really want to ensure that other patients join us in these discussions. And this resolution is so unique because it not only recognizes the importance of the engagement of civil society, but it will pave the way for them to participate and partner with health systems on planning, decision-making, and delivery of care. So it's a huge and unique moment for us. And it's not something that will be built from top down. it will be created with the patient, with the civil society and patient organizations. And good news is that they are about to create a working group, and they want IAPO to be there in this working group, where they will discuss the guidelines and the recommendations to member states, but also assist them, the member states, in the implementation of the guidelines. And we are living in a very unique moment because all of this is happening at the WHO, but in parallel, the patient community has been working in a very collaborative way at the global level and came up with what Randy mentioned before, the patient movement catalyst. This is something that it's coordinated by the Synergist, who also delivered POF, that Jason was presenting his experience, and is a collaboration between the Synergist and a group of patient advocates. So it's a collective initiative that we are all advocating for enhancing patient engagement, rights, and representation in healthcare systems globally. So you see, it's a great alignment between what's being opening at the WHO level and now the patient community, what the patient community is doing. Again, the patient community catalyst is a movement that it's increasing, and it's being developed in a very organic way. It's open to everyone. Another link that I will share with you. And it's based on really enabling patient organizations to be able to act with their full operational agency. And we are talking about ability, capacity, and willingness. And these, and we need to co-create some conditions for this to happen. And we summarize these conditions in 3 big pillars. One is transforming the way patient representatives are positioned and embedded in global health systems, decision-making structures. So it's about giving a more active role to patient organizations. The second pillar is building and reinforcing the community capacity building that will be required by these aspired roles that the patient organizations want to have. So it's about building skills. And finally, the third pillar, it's about building and reinforcing greater financial diversification, autonomy, and independence through more innovative funding mechanisms. So it's about financial resources, not expecting for us to work for free and not thinking about our sustainability. So I talked about the patient movement catalyst. There is another movement that started, I wouldn't say in parallel, but started last year. It's the Global Patient Think Tank. It's a group of over 20 patient community representatives from across the globe. It's convened by Roche, but it's a very participatory and very engaging initiative and led by these patients. IAPO is part of them. And we came together to ensure that the patient community voice is integrated into the global movement for universal health coverage. Because there are a lot of discussions happening at the global level, but the patient's voice wasn't that present as it should. And one big outcome of the Global Patient Think Tank, it's a tool that we are developing, and it's called the UHC Compass. And it's a tool to support local patients, patient organizations, and communities to concretely advance UHC on the ground. So we're talking about a tool that will help patient organizations to understand universal health coverage on the ground, the ones that they are experiencing in their country, understand what kind of skills they need to develop to help advance UHC on the ground. It's going to be a very practical tool. We are developing it. We'll pressure test it with patient organizations, and hopefully this will be available at the end of the year. So you see, there are a lot of connections and opportunities happening at the moment, and it's a very inspiring moment for IAPO and for the patient community. Again, the UHC Compass, it's a tool that is available to it's going to be available to any patient organization, and anyone who wants to interact with it. It's super invited. I'll share the link as well, and you can interact with us. If I have more time, I can talk a little bit more about other initiatives of IAPO, but I feel I should start here. You have received our 2023 highlights, I think, the initiatives, our main initiatives from 2023. And I'm always open and available for a separate call and talk more about the other initiatives that we are having at IAPO. Thank you, Randy, for the opportunity. And it's a big, big pleasure to be here presenting all of this. It's a collaboration, and IAPO is very proud to be part of this big collaboration of the patient community.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for everything you've been doing and for giving us really a snapshot on these major initiatives that are really coming to a point where it could be transformational, I think, for patients themselves and for patient organizations. And we're about at time. Of course, I just dropped on my screen the Q&A list, which was covering up a whole list of chat conversations that we'll revisit as we go forward. A lot of enthusiasm for what you shared here, Danny, what David shared, Lisa, Jeff, Harold, and Kenny, Jason. I think people really understand that our patient commitment, our mission, our desire for impact and transformation is global indeed. And what you've described, both David in discussing SMI, where we use the focus on climate and climate health and its impact on patients as a driver to bring our message forward and change the way healthcare is provided and the outcome expectations. That's an initiative that was started by and still led by now King Charles of Britain. So this is a key area. And then Danny, as you mentioned, the World Health Organization, the UN, is a place where all of the nations can make a declaration. But then it really opens the door for us to make that real on behalf of our patient members, country by country. But it gives us something to work with. And what Danny didn't share, but through my experiences, once a country commits to this, they get involved in a process, and then they're reporting annually. They want to be able to report progress. They have to look to organizations like us to make that easy. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity here for us. The cause of patients, the voice of patients, both domestically and internationally, has never been more important to bring forward. And I think IAPO, I think Sanofi and SMI and all of our collaborators, what we can do together at the National Health Council as part of the global community is powerful. And so thank you all for contributing today. I really appreciate it. We will post this session online, so people who couldn't attend in real time will have the opportunity to hear your comments. We'll be sending an evaluation to get any additional comments or recommendations. We'll respond to the questions and ideas raised in the chat. Thank you all for participating today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Spencer. Please complete the evaluation. There's the QR code, but really appreciate you all. More to come. Thank you.